This video was brought to you by the TLDR socials. Get more from TLDR by following us on Instagram and Twitter, where we post explainers that never make it to YouTube. The link's below. So, on Friday the 3rd of September, with a leadership election due on September the 29th, Yoshihide Suga announced that he would not seek re-election as the leader of the Liberal Democratic Party. Suga, who'd only been in office for a year, had seen his approval ratings plummet from 74% in September 2020 to about 30% today. Suga was the successor to Shinzo Abe, Japan's longest-standing Prime Minister in modern history. Abe was the Prime Minister from 2012 until 2020, when he stepped down with ulcerative colitis. This was actually Abe's second stint as Prime Minister, having served for a year from 2006 until 2007, before ulcerative colitis again forced him to resign. From 2007 until Abe's reappearance in 2012, Japan went through 6 different Prime Ministers, none of whom lasted more than 16 months. Abe ran an unusually stable administration, with decisive victories in the House of Representatives in 2012, 2014 and 2017. He was pretty popular, with an approval rating averaging about 50%. When he stepped down in August 2020, his popularity was waning, largely because of his response to the pandemic. Despite relatively few deaths in a country with the oldest population in the world, Abe was criticised for his apparently relaxed response to the pandemic. According to Oxford COVID-19 Government Response Tracker, the Japanese government's COVID-19 policy response was one of the least restrictive in the world. Anyway, in the wake of Abe's resignation, Liberal Democratic Secretary Toshihiro Nikai invoked an emergency leadership election. This basically meant that bog-standard party members weren't allowed to vote, and the franchise was restricted to Liberal Democratic MPs and 3 representatives from each of Japan's 47 prefectures, for a total of 535 electors. The electors chose Yoshihide Suga, Abe's right-hand man and chief cabinet secretary. Originally, Suga's promise of stability endeared him to voters, and his approval rating shot up well above Abe's. However, Suga's honeymoon didn't last long. Politically speaking, he's had a terrible pandemic. First, he decided to go ahead with the Tokyo 2020 Olympics despite widespread public anxiety. 2/3 of Japanese people didn't believe that the Olympics could be safe and secure. Second, Japan's vaccination program has been relatively slow. Just 49% of Japanese people are fully vaccinated, compared to 64% in the UK and 67% in China. This is part of the reason that Japan has, at least by its own stringent standards, failed to contain COVID. Despite a low COVID fatality rate, Japan was overwhelmed by cases in January and February of this year, with overwhelmed hospitals turning patients away, forcing Suga to declare a 2-month state of emergency. There was a 2-month respite before another wave in May, forcing Suga to declare another state of emergency. The wheels really came off in August though, when the Delta variant triggered the worst wave yet. In late August, Japan experienced more than 20,000 confirmed cases a day, or about 180 cases per million. Now, again, it's worth noting that while this wave was the worst that Japan had experienced, it's actually far less than other developed countries. The UK and the US, for example, experienced case rates per million of over 800 and 700 respectively in January, and have had a higher caseload than Japan for basically the whole pandemic. Nonetheless, the Japanese public and Suga himself clearly considered his pandemic response a failure. His approval rating plummeted to just 30%, with a net approval of -20%. On top of this, the Liberal Democratic Party suffered some poor results in regional elections. They lost 3 by-elections in a row in April 2021, and in July they underperformed in Tokyo's prefectural election, failing to win a majority in the Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly. All this put Suga on the back foot, and on Tuesday, the 31st of August, Suga floated the idea of a cabinet reshuffle or an early election in mid-September, before the Liberal Democratic leadership election on September the 29th, as a last-ditch effort to boost his flagging support. Unfortunately for Suga, the Liberal Democratic top brass didn't think this was a good idea, forcing him to backtrack on the plan the next day. And on Friday, he resigned. So what happens now? Well, the leadership election is due for the end of this month, and as of September the 9th, there are 3 declared candidates. Fumio Kishida, a former foreign minister and current chairman of the Liberal Democratic Party's Policy Research Council, a position traditionally seen as a stepping stone to leadership of the party. In his opening speech, Kishida talked about wealth distribution and investment in education and renewable energy, including nuclear power. The second is Sanai Takaichi, a former internal affairs minister popular with the more conservative wing of the party for her hawkish views on defence and diplomacy. She's expressed support for punishing media outlets that are critical of the government and imprisoning anyone who damages the Japanese flag. The third is Seiko Noda, another former internal affairs minister. Noda is on the more liberal side and doesn't belong to any specific faction within the Liberal Democratic Party. She's held the portfolio for women's empowerment and is in favour of allowing married couples to keep separate names. It's unclear whether she'll be able to garner the 20 signatures required to get onto the ballot. However, the frontrunner is perhaps Taro Kono, the current vaccines minister, who has been backed by the outgoing Suga. A weekend poll put him top of the pack at 32% support, with only Foreign Defence Minister Shigeru Ishiba anywhere near him. Ishiba polled at 27% but has since suggested that he won't run, which is good news for Kono. Despite presiding over a relatively slow vaccine rollout, Kono has largely avoided public criticism by apologising early for any delays, and he's been buoyed by a recent increase in vaccination rate. Japan actually now has so many vaccines it's been able to donate some to Taiwan. Kono is popular among younger voters, in large part due to his social media presence. He has 2.3 million Twitter followers, a rarity in Japanese politics, which is dominated by old-school establishment politicians. He's also proficient in English. He was educated in the US and Poland and has urged other Japanese diplomats to improve their English. Last month he published a book titled Move Japan Forwards, in which he argued that Japan should strengthen its security relationship with the US and invest heavily in renewable energy and green technology. Kono is renowned as an outspoken maverick. He's questioned the government's nuclear plans and tight immigration policy, but he also hails from one of Japan's numerous political dynasties, which makes dramatic shifts in policy unlikely. His father, Yohei Kono, was a party president and deputy prime minister. His grandfather was head of a powerful faction in the 1950s, and his great-uncle was Speaker of the House of Representatives in the 70s. So those are the candidates in the running at the moment. Whoever ends up winning the election, they won't have much time to sort things out, with national elections for the House of Representatives due before November the 28th. But what do you think? Who do you think is going to become the next Japanese Prime Minister? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram for more TLDR content. You can follow just the TLDR global socials, or go wild and follow whichever TLDR accounts interest you. Anyway, following and sharing our posts not only gets you more from us, but it really helps us out, so thanks a lot. And of course, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified whenever we post a video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible, and if you want to see your name at the end of videos, you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that is in the description.